I pretended to be happy while my wife was pregnant with a kid that wasn't mine. I shocked her right in the delivery room. Hey everyone! If you love wild real-life stories, hit like, subscribe, and drop a comment below. Let's get into it. I'm 39 years old, and my wife, who's 34, and I have been married for 3 years. Before that, we dated for 4, and while I wasn't in a rush to settle down, she was pretty eager to make things official. Wanting to make her happy, I went along with it. About a year ago, she really started pushing for us to have a baby. I wasn't exactly against it, but it wasn't something I had ever felt strongly about. Still, I agreed, and we began trying. But the process was way harder than I expected. Month after month, nothing happened, and the stress started getting to me. My mental health took a serious hit, and eventually, I decided to get checked out. During this time, my wife's attitude changed a lot. She became short-tempered, impatient, and honestly, kind of cruel. I tried to brush it off, telling myself she was just frustrated, but it got to the point where I felt like I was constantly walking on eggshells around her. Then, after a routine checkup, the doctors gave me the kind of news that knocks the wind out of you. I was infertile. Even though I hadn't been the one pushing for a kid, hearing that I would never be a father hit me hard. Somewhere along the way, I'd started to picture it, what it would be like to raise a child, to be a dad. And just like that, it was gone. But as painful as that was, I knew the worst part was still ahead, telling my wife. I hesitated, putting it off for days because I was dreading her reaction. If she'd been treating me badly before, how would she act once she found out that I was the reason she wasn't getting the one thing she wanted most? But before I could work up the courage to tell her, she dropped a bombshell on me instead. Completely out of the blue, she sat me down, all smiles, and told me she was pregnant. I felt like the floor had been ripped out from under me. I managed to play along, forcing myself to smile and act happy so she wouldn't suspect anything. But inside, I was reeling. That same night, I scheduled another test just to be sure. Maybe, just maybe, the first result had been wrong. It wasn't. The second test confirmed it. I was 100% infertile. Which meant only one thing: my wife had been unfaithful. The reality of it made me feel sick. And the worst part? I had no idea who the father could be. There was no way she had gone through any kind of medical procedure to conceive. We shared finances, and since I was the sole breadwinner, I would have known if she spent money on something like that. The only logical explanation was that she had cheated. For the next few days, I kept my mouth shut. I didn't confront her, didn't say a word to anyone. I needed more information before I made a move. Meanwhile, she was over the moon, busy planning a big party to announce her pregnancy. She was glowing, full of excitement, while I was barely keeping it together. Then, the day of the party arrived. Friends, family, even some of my coworkers showed up. Among the guests was someone I hadn't given much thought to before, our 27-year-old neighbor. He lived right across the street with his aunt and was, objectively speaking, a very good-looking guy. Not just better looking than me, better looking than most people. He was a model, though still trying to establish himself in the industry. My wife had always been especially friendly with him. When he first moved in, she made a point of cooking meals for him and his aunt. He'd even joined us for dinner a few times, and I had always found him to be polite and well-spoken. He and my wife shared a background in literature, so they hit it off quickly, bonding over books and writing. I had never seen a reason to be suspicious until now. When he walked through the door that evening, my wife's entire demeanor changed. Her face lit up in a way that made my stomach turn. She made a beeline for him, wrapping him in a hug that lasted just a little too long. Nobody else seemed to notice, but I did. Something was off, and I needed proof. So, while the party was in full swing, I slipped away under the pretense of using the bathroom. Instead, I went straight to our bedroom and opened her laptop. I had already gone through her phone a few nights earlier while she was asleep, but I hadn't found anything incriminating. The laptop, however, had always been a different story. She was glued to it constantly, either watching something or typing away. Anytime I asked what she was working on, she'd quickly turn the screen away and say she was writing her novel, something she had been talking about for months. I had no reason to doubt her before, but now, I was almost certain she had been using it to hide something from me. Luckily, she hadn't set up a password. Within minutes, I found exactly what I was looking for, a second email account. And when I opened it, my worst fears were confirmed. There, right in front of me, was a long string of messages between her and our neighbor. Love letters, flirtations, confessions. It was him. He was the father. From the emails, I could see that she had already told him about the pregnancy, and his reaction wasn't what she had hoped for. He was upset, furious, even. Their communication had suddenly stopped, likely because he wanted to end whatever was going on between them. But my wife? She wasn't ready to let him go that easily. And as I sat there staring at the screen, the reality of it all sank in. The party was still going on downstairs. My wife was celebrating with friends and family, and yet, I was completely alone, watching my entire life fall apart in real time. I found out my wife's plan, and I wasn't about to let her win. Just when I thought I'd seen the worst of it, I came across an email that made my stomach turn. In it, my wife was telling our neighbor that she had already spoken to a lawyer friend who was going to help her file for divorce right after the baby was born. Her entire plan was laid out in black and white. She had convinced me to start trying for a baby just so she could secure both spousal support and child support after leaving me. Then, a few months down the road, she'd be free to run off with her boyfriend and live the perfect little life she had been scheming for. I felt physically sick reading that email, and even now, I get that same nauseating feeling whenever I think about it. But I didn't waste time wallowing in my emotions. I pulled out my phone, snapped pictures of the emails as evidence, then carefully shut down the laptop and put it back exactly as I'd found it. At that moment, I wasn't just mad about the cheating. That was bad enough, but what really disgusted me was the fact that she had deliberately set me up. It wasn't just betrayal, it was full-blown manipulation. She had used me, lied to my face, and tried to trap me into financially supporting her dream life with her freeloading boyfriend. It was so twisted that I almost couldn't believe it. And the craziest part? She had been acting so cheerful, so convincing, that I had never suspected a thing. It was disturbing how easily she could fake it. But if she was going to play a long game, so was I. There was no way I was going to let her get away with this without feeling the same kind of pain and betrayal that she had put me through. Some people might say it was petty, but I didn't care. I was going to make sure she paid for what she did. So, I made a decision. I was going to act like the perfect husband. I'd play along right up until the moment it would hurt the most. For the next 9 months, I put on the performance of a lifetime. I was the doting, supportive husband, always there for her. I took her to every doctor's appointment, reminded her to take her vitamins, and played the role of an excited soon-to-be dad flawlessly. It wasn't easy, knowing the truth the entire time. Every moment she smiled at me, every time she talked about our future, I knew it was all a lie. But the more she pretended, the stronger my resolve became. Then, a few days ago, the moment finally arrived. My wife went into labor. I was nervous, but not for the reasons a normal father-to-be would be. Still, I pushed everything aside and got her to the hospital. I had already called her parents to let them know, but I didn't say a word to mine. I didn't want them to be there in case things got messy. Since her parents had to drive about an hour to reach the hospital, we had some time alone. That's when I decided to drop the bomb. Once she was settled in the delivery room, I told her I was stepping out to make a call to our neighbor. Her face went pale. She stammered, trying to brush it off, saying there was no reason for him to be there, that she didn't want a stranger in the room during such an intimate moment. I just smiled, pulled out my phone, and showed her the results of my fertility test. Then, right after that, I handed her the divorce papers I had filed just days before her due date. Watching the realization dawn on her face was priceless. Her mouth opened and closed as she struggled to find the words, but I didn't stick around to hear them. I turned on my heel and walked out of that room, leaving her to sit with the truth. As soon as I stepped outside, I dialed our neighbor's number. He picked up, and before he could even say anything, I simply told him that my wife was in labor and figured he might want to be there. Then I hung up before he could respond. I didn't wait around. I headed straight for the parking lot and got in my car. The second I saw her father's car pull up, I drove off. I wanted to be long gone before they had a chance to find me. I even turned off my phone, just in case. I just drove, no real destination in mind, until I reached a motel a little outside the city. I had planned for this moment in advance, packing my bags weeks ago and keeping them in my trunk. So I had everything I needed, and I didn't feel caught off guard at all. The rest of the day, I spent it watching TV, drinking a few beers, and doing anything I could to take my mind off the chaos I had just walked away from. That night, I slept better than I had in months, knowing that it was finally over. The next morning, I turned my phone back on. As expected, there were hundreds of missed calls and messages from my wife and our neighbor. I didn't even bother opening them. What had catch my attention, though, were the messages from my parents and my brother. Apparently, my wife had contacted them after realizing I was completely unreachable. I knew I had to explain everything to them sooner or later, so I called my parents and told them I'd be coming home soon. I also asked if they could have my brother there as well. I wanted to get everything out in the open all at once. When I arrived, the looks on their faces said it all. They were confused, frustrated, even a little angry. To them, I had just abandoned my wife at the hospital and missed the birth of my own child. And on top of that, I had kept them in the dark, causing them to miss what they thought was the arrival of their grandchild. But I sat them down and told them everything, every last detail of what had really happened. By the time I finished, they were completely speechless. I walked away, and there's no looking back. I braced myself for backlash from my family, questions, anger, maybe even disappointment. But instead, the only response I got was from my dad, who just sighed and said he hoped things wouldn't escalate any further. No accusations, no debates. My mom and brother stayed quiet, processing everything I had just told them. That conversation happened a few days ago, and while my family hasn't said much about it since, my wife has been relentless. She's been calling and texting nonstop, accusing me of ruining what should have been the most special moment of her life, becoming a mother for the first time. I haven't responded to a single message. I haven't even blocked her yet, though I did block my neighbor. He actually had the audacity to text me, trying to convince me that my wife still has hope and wants me to come back. Yeah, right? I have no doubt that the real reason he's sticking around and trying to smooth things over is because he needs her to get something out of the divorce. Since they're both unemployed, any kind of financial support from me would be a lifeline for them. But that's not happening. Look, I never had an issue with my wife being a homemaker. I respected her choice to take care of the house, and I never pressured her to quit her job. That was entirely her decision. But while I was working to support us, she was sneaking around behind my back, betraying me in the worst way. That's not something I can ever forgive. Thankfully, I have solid proof of her cheating, and my lawyer is confident that we can use it to avoid paying spousal support. I'd rather not give her a dime, but even in the worst-case scenario, if I do end up having to pay something, at least I won't have to stay married to her. She should honestly consider herself lucky that I'm not kicking her out immediately, since the house is in my name. I could legally force her to leave right away, but I'd rather just let her figure things out on her own and be done with it. As for my neighbor, he's still struggling to get steady modeling work, which means they're both broke and now have a baby to support. Good luck with that. Managing their expenses, plus a newborn, is going to be next to impossible for them, even if they pool their money together, what little they actually have. I've done my part. I walked away, and I'm not looking back. Update 1. A week later. It's been almost a week since my wife gave birth, and I've been staying in a hotel, keeping my distance. I still haven't gone to see her, and I have no plans to. She keeps texting and calling, but I don't see the point. What is there left to talk about? Now, I'm focusing on making sure she doesn't get a cent from me. With the proof I have, my lawyer is confident that we can shut down any attempt at spousal support. I saved all the incriminating emails she exchanged with our neighbor, backed them up on my laptop, and stored them in multiple places. Even if she tries to delete everything, it won't make a difference. I already have what I need. At the end of the day, I'm just relieved I got out of this nightmare. I don't have to support them. I don't have to waste another second of my time on them, and I don't even have to acknowledge their existence. That being said, I am bracing for the possibility that she'll try to contest the divorce. Based on how completely out of touch with reality she's been, I wouldn't put it past her. But I'm prepared for that too. No matter what she tries, she can't erase the truth. She can't undo the emails, the betrayal, or the fact that I know exactly what kind of person she is now. And at the end of the day, that's what really matters. I know I made the right decision by walking away. She thought she could win. Now she's left with nothing. Even if she wiped her entire email account clean, it wouldn't make a difference. I had everything backed up, saved in multiple places, and there was no way for her to erase what I already had. I wasn't worried. At the end of the day, even if things took a turn for the worst, and I did end up having to pay her some kind of support, at least I wouldn't have to stay married to her. That alone was worth everything. Honestly, she should be grateful I was giving her the time to move out on her own instead of legally forcing her out of my house. I was hoping that this whole situation would wrap up quickly, but I should have known better. Update 2. She's even dumber than I thought. Turns out, I was right. My wife is completely delusional. She wasn't happy with the divorce settlement I offered, which was honestly more than fair. I had only agreed to give her back the money she had spent during the marriage, And if you ask me, that was generous. But apparently, she thought she could negotiate for more. I don't know what fantasy world she's living in, but good for her, I guess. Then, yesterday, she sent me a message saying she had officially moved out of the house. I felt relieved. Finally, she was out of my life for good. I figured she had gone back to her parents' place, which would have made the most sense. But no. Instead of moving somewhere far away where I wouldn't have to deal with her, she just moved across the damn street. Into his house. So now, every single day, I have to see her and my ex-neighbor turned baby daddy right in front of me. For a split second, I considered packing up and moving back to a hotel, just to avoid the headache. But then I thought, why should I leave? This is my house. I have every right to stay here, and I'm not going to let them make me feel uncomfortable in my own home. Still, I couldn't wrap my head around why she wouldn't just go stay with her parents. Living with the guy she cheated with was a terrible look for her in court, and it was only going to make things worse in the divorce proceedings. But then, as I was going through all the unread messages I had ignored over the past few days, I came across one from my father-in-law. I hadn't responded to a lot of people lately, so his message had gotten buried in the chaos. It was a long text, an apology, actually. He told me he was deeply ashamed of what his daughter had done. He and his wife were completely against her actions, and they wanted me to know that they did not support her in any way. Then, he hit me with something unexpected. He had disinherited her. Apparently, she had told him that she wanted to fight the divorce in court, and that was the final straw for him. He wanted nothing to do with her mess. Reading that message stirred something in me. It was the first time throughout this entire disaster that I felt seen. It validated every ounce of anger, betrayal, and frustration I had been carrying around. For a second, I even felt tears building up, but I pushed them down. At this point, I still couldn't figure out if my wife was just incredibly stupid or if she had some other twisted scheme up her sleeve. I hoped she was just clueless, but honestly, I wouldn't put anything past her. Now that we were neighbors, I knew she and her boyfriend were going to do everything in their power to make me uncomfortable. Maybe they'd try to make me jealous. Maybe they'd just enjoy rubbing their happiness in my face. But I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction. On the bright side, at least I wasn't wasting money on a hotel anymore. Final update. Karma hits hard. It's been about a month since the divorce negotiations started, and things couldn't be going worse for my wife. Not only was I able to prove she cheated, but she actually helped my case by moving in with the guy I accused her of having an affair with. There wasn't a judge in the world who would doubt my story now. In a last-ditch effort, she tried to throw a bunch of false accusations my way. She claimed I was an alcoholic, said that my drinking had caused my infertility, and that was why she had an affair. According to her, I had turned into a bitter, angry man when we were trying to conceive. It was almost funny how desperate she was. Too bad for her. It was easy to disprove. I had quit drinking a year ago, the moment we decided to start trying for a baby. I hadn't touched alcohol since. And everyone, family, friends, even her parents, knew that. I don't know why she thought she could get away with such a blatant lie. Maybe she was just throwing whatever she could at the wall, hoping something would stick. But it didn't. At this point, she knew she had lost. The settlement wasn't going to work in her favor, and the money she had been banking on? Gone. And I guess she must have told her boyfriend, because a few nights ago, things really fell apart. I was sitting in my living room when I suddenly heard shouting from across the street. A full-blown screaming match. I didn't even need to hear the words to know exactly what was happening. Then, within minutes, I watched as my wife and her baby were thrown out of the house. Literally. Her boyfriend, her baby's father, was standing in the doorway, yelling at her, calling her every horrible name in the book. And then, to top it all off, I watched as he pushed her while she was holding the baby. That's when I jumped up and ran outside. Whatever had happened between us didn't matter in that moment. I wasn't about to let an innocent baby suffer because of her choices. By the time I got to their house, the door had already slammed shut behind her. She was standing there, crying, holding her kid with nowhere to go. I didn't say a word. I just took the baby from her arms, grabbed her hand, and led them back across the street to my house. Once inside, I called her father and told him to come pick them up. For the next hour, I sat in the living room with my wife, who was sobbing uncontrollably. It was surreal. Just a few weeks ago, she had been so sure of her plan. And now? She had nothing. She kept apologizing, over and over, saying she had been so desperate to be with someone she loved that she lost all self-respect. She told me she regretted everything, that she was done fighting, and that she wouldn't contest the divorce anymore. She was finally ready to let go. I don't know if she'll ever press charges against the guy, but I hope she does. She might have betrayed me, but no one deserves to be treated the way you treated her. An hour later, her father arrived. He thanked me for everything before taking her and the baby away. And just like that, they were gone. I don't regret anything. I did the right thing, and I walked away with my dignity intact. And as far as I'm concerned, this chapter of my life is officially closed. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more. See you next time.